Acts 27. Join me at verse number 1. We're going to read for a little bit. It says, when the time came, we set sail for Italy. Paul and several other prisoners were placed in the custody of a Roman officer named Julius, a captain of the imperial regiment. Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica, was also with us. And we left on a ship whose home port was Adramyttium on the northwest coast of the province of Asia. It was scheduled to make several stops at ports along the coast of the province. And we had lost a lot of time. The weather was becoming dangerous for sea travel because it was so late in the fall. And Paul spoke to the ship's officers about it. He said, "Men, I believe there is trouble ahead if we go on. Shipwreck, loss of cargo, and danger to our lives as well." But the officer in charge of the prisoners listened more to the ship's captain and the owner than to Paul. Drop down to verse number 13. It says, when a light wind began blowing from the south, the sailors thought they could make it. So they pulled up anchor and sailed close to the shore of Crete. But the weather changed abruptly, say abruptly. And a wind of typhoon strength called a northeaster burst across the island and blew us out to sea. The sailors couldn't turn the ship into the wind, so they gave up and let it run before the gale. Verse number 18 says, the next day as gale force winds continued to batter the ship, the crew began throwing the cargo overboard. The following day, they even took some of the ship's gear and threw it overboard. The terrible storm raged for many days, blotting out the sun and the stars until at last, all hope was gone. No one had eaten for a long time, and finally Paul called the crew together and said, "Men, you should have listened to me in the first place and not left Crete. You would have avoided all this damage and loss, but take courage. None of you will lose your lives, even though the ship will go down. For last night an angel of the God to whom I belong and whom I serve, he stood beside me. And he said, 'Don't be afraid, Paul, for you will surely stand trial before Caesar. What's more, God in his goodness has granted safety to everyone sailing with you. So take courage, for I believe God.'" That's enough right there. Be seated in the presence of the Lord. On your way to your seat, though, do me a favor and tell your neighbor, take courage. Come on, you're going to have to do better than that. Tell somebody else, take courage. Come on, grab one more person by the eye and tell them, take courage. I know the storm is raging, but you got to take courage. I know the wind is blowing and the thunder is booming, but I need you to take courage. When you can't see the sun through the clouds, family, hear me. When you can't tell the night from the day, when the storm's moving in faster than you can keep up with, I need you to stop freaking out. I need you to not lose your faith. I don't want you to lose your mind. I just want you to take some courage. Into every battle, I need you to take courage. Into every burden, into every situation, every up and every down, every bob and every weave, into this season in particular you're about to walk into, family. I need you to take courage. You can't leave home without it. Courage. Don't let your heart forsake it. Courage. Don't let your circumstance deplete it, because if you ever needed it, you need it right now. Take courage. Family, I want you to hear me now. Courage survives storms. We in this series called Surviving the Storm. That's what we're leaning into in this moment. I need you to understand something. Courage survives storms. If you were ever wondering what the common denominator, somebody said earlier, it's the courage of the Lord. Courage survives storm. Courage overcomes attacks. Courage outlasts enemies. When the Philistines captured David at Gath, it was courage that stirred in him to write Psalm 56. Whenever I'm afraid, he said, I put my trust in you, O Lord, whose word I praise. In God I trust. I shall not be afraid. What can flesh do to me? That was courage talking. Courage. It was courage dripping from Paul's pen when he told the church at Ephesus in Ephesians 6. Paul said, listen, I know y'all are dealing with all manner of literal spiritual warfare. You're dealing with real deal spiritual warfare. I know you're facing demonic attack from powers and principalities of the highest order. But he said, be strong in the Lord. Be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. And he said, put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's scheme. He's talking courage. Why? Because courage survives storms. Courage survives storms. But the question today is are you taking it with you? Are you taking courage? Now, I need to be careful here. I want to be real clear. I need to be very clear. I'm not referring to courage that is born out of our sense of natural bravery. I need to make a distinction here. I'm not talking about bravery per se. There's nothing wrong with being brave. I want you to be brave. I want you to, bravery is a noble thing. It's a good thing, but it's not what I'm talking about here because you can be brave and not be spiritually courageous. You see, bravery will make you charge into battle, but courage will make you trust God while you're losing one. Bravery can make you boisterous and loud, but courage can keep you faithful while heaven is silent. Bravery can make you jump up, but courage knows how to help you sit down. There's a difference between bravery and courage, and here's the difference. Here's the real difference. Biblical courage is not confidence in yourself. Biblical courage is not really about you at all. Biblical courage is confidence that's rooted in a revelation. Biblical courage is confidence rooted in a revelation. It's not rooted in your personality. It's not rooted in your sense of duty or nobility or responsibility. It's not about your ego. It's not about your adrenaline rush. Real courage doesn't come from any of that. Real courage comes from a knowledge of who God is, and if you have it, it will help you survive the storms. You got to take courage. Got to take courage. It's that same courage that caused some of y'all in here to survive things that should have broken your mind. It was courage. It was courage that allowed some of y'all to walk on storm waters that other folks drowned in. That was courage. Biblical courage, because when the storm took your comfort and it took your relationship and it took your money and it took your strength in your body, or it took whatever it took, what it couldn't take was your revelation. What it couldn't take was your knowledge and your view of who God is above who you are. That's real courage. Somebody knows what I'm talking about. And because you still had your courage rooted in a revelation, you survived the storm. You can do a lot with the right revelation. You can accomplish a whole lot when you have a confidence that's rooted in a revelation of who God is. What revelation am I talking about? It's the same one Paul declared right here in the text. He declared it in the middle of a sinking ship in Acts 27. The boat is literally going down under the water, and Paul looks at everybody, storm crash and lightning crash and thunder and all the things are going on, and he looks at everybody and says, I believe God. That's courage. Courage rooted in a revelation. Courage that believes God more than the wind. Courage that believes God more than the rain. Courage that believes God more than the circumstance or the environment or the noise or the distraction. Courage roots itself in a revelation that you see beyond the stuff and you see your Savior. That's courage. It's confidence rooted in a revelation, and it'll make you a survivor of storms. I have a word for even the graduates. We celebrate all the graduates today. Y'all tell them we love them. Tell them you celebrate them. We love them. We're proud of them. But I got to be fair with the graduates. I got to be fair with all of us that are graduating from one situation to another. I need to let you know a little bit of an inconvenient truth. There might be a moment in your life where you might just find yourself like Paul did in the middle of a storm on a ship that's not going to make it to land. I need to be fair with you. Life sometimes feels like a ship that's breaking apart, and it may not make it to the shore. We need to talk about it before it happens. I don't want you to be distracted. I don't want you to lose yourself when it happens, because the enemy would much rather have you taken by surprise if every day in your life don't go perfect. He wants you taken by surprise if every battle doesn't go your way, if every issue doesn't work out just so. Your enemy would have you be surprised and thrown off by that, so much so that you forget what I'm about to tell you. But if and when that moment comes, I want you to prove him wrong by remembering these words. Here's the words I want you to remember. I'm a survivor. I need you to remember those words. I'm a survivor because my courage is not rooted in a reflection of who I am. My courage is rooted in a revelation of who my God is. I'm a survivor. So the wind can blow, the lightning can come, the boat can start shaking. I can see the boards coming apart right now. But guess what? I'm going to look at those boards and say, in the name of Jesus, I command you to stay together as long as the Lord wants you to, because I'm a survivor and I believe God. I'm a survivor. Storms don't drown me. They don't. They don't drown me. Because I got my hand in the hand of a literal flotation device. Jesus don't drown, so how am I gonna? Storms don't drown me. I got my safety vest on. I don't go in the water. I don't go in the water without a life vest on. The storms don't drown me. They don't drown me because they draw me closer to the feet of Jesus. They don't break me, they build me. Because I've got courage that's rooted in a revelation. And that's essentially what we see in Paul's testimony right here in Acts 27. And before we get too far down the road, let me remind you how Paul even got in this situation. Let me just give you a little bit of context, a little bit of the story. How did he even get in this situation? Sometimes we get so far down the road and we look up and we say, how did I even get here? What actually happened that I got here? But Paul, he looked up. This was not happen chance. This was not. This was an assignment. See, when we meet Paul in Acts 27, he's on a ship headed to Italy because of a riot that happened in Jerusalem. Acts 21, there was a riot in Jerusalem. Remember, all the way back in Acts 21, Paul, he had returned to Jerusalem after spending some time on his missionary journeys. He came back to Jerusalem, Acts 21, it was after his third missionary journey. He left Jerusalem all the way back in Acts 15. He left Jerusalem, he'd been sent on his way after a meeting between the apostles that we now refer to as the Jerusalem Council. It was a meeting where all the apostles got together and they affirmed among one another what the order of operations was. They affirmed their understanding that salvation belonged not just to the Jews but to the Gentiles as well. They were getting on one accord. They were praying together and hearing from the Lord. And so the council met in Acts 15 and they all got together and they said, yes, salvation is not just for the Jews, it's for the Gentiles as well. They agreed and they said, let's not make it difficult for people to come to Jesus. That's what they, if you read 15 in Acts, that's what they said together. We're not going to make it difficult for people to come to Jesus. Let's not create arbitrary barriers where God has opened doors for discipleship. Let's not force Gentiles to become culturally Jewish before they can become spiritually Christian. That's what they aligned in Acts 15. And Paul and the other apostles, they aligned around these convictions, and after doing so, the apostles laid hands on Paul and his ministry companions, and they blessed them, and they sent them forth to minister and plant Gentile churches all over Asia Minor. So Paul leaves town, and he goes to start preaching. And now we're all the way back in Acts 21, a couple of chapters, and many years of church planting has happened. And now Paul is back in Jerusalem in 21, and after his missionary journey, and he's bringing now financial resources and support to the home church there in Jerusalem. Remember, the church in Jerusalem was the home church, and all the way in 15, they were like, okay, we're gonna let the Gentiles in. And now, all these years later, the Gentile churches were now supporting the church at Jerusalem because they'd been beat up so bad, and so Jerusalem now was receiving inputs from the Gentile church. And Paul, he arrived back in town to bring these gifts and all of this, and also an update of what was going on in all of the Gentile churches. But before he even landed, before Paul even got there, the Lord had sent a prophetic word to him. Abagus came to him and said, you're going to have some trouble when you get there. You're going to have, you're going to hit some persecution. So Paul, when he knew he was about to face some stuff. So he showed up in Jerusalem, and he did all the things he needed to do. And just as the Lord warned him, while Paul was worshiping in the temple in Jerusalem one day, a riot breaks out. It was stirred up by some folks that didn't like Paul and what he was doing, what he was about. They didn't appreciate his ministry, and they falsely accused him of bringing a non-Jewish person into the temple, which was a serious infraction for them, and they began physically attacking him, trying to kill him, trying to murder him right there in the text. And so a group of Roman soldiers, they showed up to intervene, but what they ended up doing was arresting Paul. And ultimately what started as one riot, it turned into nearly 3 years of imprisonment for Paul. How did I even get here? He was doing the will of God. He was doing the will of God. Now look, what the enemy went for evil, God gonna turn it around for good. So it's gonna work out. But because Paul was a Roman citizen, and because his treatment in Jerusalem was both unjust and illegal by their standards, Paul had the right to appeal his conviction to the emperor, Caesar. So Paul says to himself, I'm gonna use this injustice, this evil. I'm gonna let it be the good that God wants it to be. So he says he's gonna use this opportunity to appeal to Caesar, and it's not explicitly in the book, but I just bet when Paul got into the throne room of Caesar, I think he was gonna share the gospel. He wasn't just there to plead his case and try to get some reward for what he'd been through. He had an agenda. He was going to talk to Caesar about Jesus. So 3 years later, that's what's happening right here in Acts 27. Paul's on a boat on his way to appeal and share the gospel with Caesar. When's the last time you ended up in the storm of your life because you were trying to present the gospel, trying to do what God? That's what Paul was dealing with. When's the last time you found yourself in the storm of your life because you were trying to do God's will? And we talked about this a few weeks ago, but every storm isn't born out of disobedience. I just need to tell you that, because the enemy will attack you with this. He'll try to convict you and beat you up on it. Every storm you go through is not born out of disobedience. Some are born out of assignment. Some of what we go through is born out of some assignment. Sometimes storms aren't about punishment as much as they are about purpose. Sometimes the storm isn't proof that you missed God. Sometimes it's evidence that he found you. And he's graduated us to the moment that sometimes he graduates to us to a moment that feels like a storm. Why? Because you got an appointment with Caesar. Some of y'all in the storm because you did mess up. But sometimes we're in storms because of the appointment that God has made on our behalf. He's got an appointment for you. There's an assignment for you, and he's ordering your steps as heavy as they might feel sometimes. Everything you've been through, every nook and cranny, every bob and weave. Can you look back now and see, oh, I understand some things that felt like a storm back then. I understand why he opened some doors and closed some doors. I understand why he said no when I really wanted it. Sometimes when you are mature enough to turn around and look at your life, you'll see that it was for a purpose. I wish I had time. Now, this is a whole revival worth of sermons in this Acts 20. I don't have time to do it all here, talk about it all. In fact, I want to encourage you to read Acts 27 when you get a second. You get your popcorn. It's good. But I'm gonna give you my cliff notes today, because I'm gonna give you cliff notes of something powerful God revealed to me concerning this passage. When I look at this passage, I see three dimensions of courage. Three dimensions of courage that Paul is revealing to us. Three dimensions of courage that show up in the text as markers of a believer whose courage is so real and rooted in revelation that they will survive the storm. Three quick dimensions. I'm going to have my seat. Dimension number one, real courage knows how to submit. I know y'all don't like that word. But real courage knows how to submit. Verse 10, Paul, he's a smart guy. He done seen some things. He's been some places. And if you listen to him, he might be able to help you. He said, men, verse 10, I believe there is trouble ahead if we go on. Shipwreck, loss of cargo, and danger to our lives. But the officer in charge of the prisoners listened more to the have you ever been there? Listen more to the ship's captain and the owner. You know, the owner of the ship, he was just interested in cargo going where cargo went. Prisoners, grain, he didn't care because he was getting paid for deliveries. He said, no, y'all get on the boat. They listened to the owner of the ship instead of Paul, who was discerning. See, Paul, he gained some favor with the head guard there. Julius was the guard's name, but he didn't have enough favor to influence any decisions about the direction. So Paul, he was obviously correct in what he discerned. And before they knew it, Scripture says they found themselves in open water battling typhoon-level winds. Typhoon-level winds and dropping anchors. I think 4 anchors they dropped right just to hold on to the land. Hold on to the ground in the middle of the storm. See, one of the easiest things in the world to do is to become arrogant when you know you're right. It's easy to do. Because Paul could have got real arrogant. It's easy to get arrogant when you know you're right. Paul was right. Paul discerned the storm correctly. He recognized the danger. There will be moments in your life when you are right. But courage sometimes submits and is humble anyway. Not because we throwing all the power into that other party's hands, but because we're submitting to the power of God. Paul was right. He discerned the storm correctly. He recognized the danger. He knew they shouldn't sail. But verse 11 says, the officer in charge of the prisoners listened more to the ship's captain and the owner than to Paul. Now, I know if we're being honest, that would make us mad. We'd be frustrated with that. I know y'all. Y'all would be frustrated. I would be frustrated because there's nothing more irritating than watching people ignore what God put in your mouth. But there's nothing more frustrating than that. And some of us, if we're being honest, we would have spent the whole rest of chapter 27 would have been filled with some "I told you so." Can't even get to the rest of the story because Paul's "I'm telling you so." But Paul shows us something powerful about courage in practice. Real courage does not need to control outcomes. It doesn't need to control. Real courage is the humility to submit when God allows your warning even to go unheeded, because sometimes courage means trusting God even when your discernment isn't acknowledged. It's remaining humble even when your insights are ignored. It's surrendering your need to be validated. The question is, are you courageous enough to submit even if it means you can survive? Are you courageous enough to be humble, even if it means that you got to submit to folks that aren't? Paul doesn't jump overboard. He doesn't rebel. He doesn't become bitter. He doesn't stop trusting God. He submits himself to the moment, and he trusts that if God allowed the storm, God's going to carry him through it. Real courage knows how to submit, family. Real courage knows how to trust God, even to release control. And sometimes the greatest act of courage is not proving you were right, but showing that you're submitted. Dimension 1, real courage knows how to submit. But not only that, dimension 2, real courage stays in the boat. Real courage stays in the boat. Real courage now stays in the boat. Now, by the time we get deeper in Acts 27, the storm, it went from bad to real bad. It was real bad. Luke's the writer here. Luke says the winds are raging, the ship is being battered, the crew is throwing cargo overboard. They can't see the sun, they can't see the stars, and eventually the text says all hope was gone. Have you ever been in those situations where literally all hope is gone? It's not just late, it's not delayed, the hope is gone. Verse 30, the sailors attempt to secretly escape the ship. That's when you know it's real bad. The professionals trying to flee. The sailors, they're trying to escape the ship. They were lowering the lifeboat into the sea. In other words, the experts, the people everybody trusted in the beginning of the journey, the ones that had made the decision in the first place that they're going, now they all trying to bail because it's hopeless. And can I tell you something? Storms have a way of making people abandon ship. They do. Running for the hills. Pain makes people run. Fear makes people isolate. Disappointment makes people detach. But listen, understand the devil can do some real damage in your life if every time one of your ships hits a storm, your reaction is to abandon it. He can do some real damage in your life every time some storm clouds come and you looking for the exit. Every time the wind, even y'all know your knees start hurting when the rain coming. Some of y'all are looking at your knees every time and gonna run every time you get a twinge in your knee. The devil will use that. Storms have a way of making people abandon ship. But that's how people end up abandoning their lives and their promises prematurely. That's how we end up not walking in the promise that God has for us, because the minute it starts looking difficult, we run for the lifeboat. We abandon our hope. We abandon our creative ideas. We abandon our relationships. How many times have you dreamed about that business and keep putting it up on the shelf? You got a whole notebook worth of ideas, and you just pull them out when you're depressed, or when somebody talk bad to you at work, and the minute everything starts going and it starts getting scary, if I go that way, you put the book back up. How many times? Every time one of our ship hits a storm, if the reaction is to abandon it, the enemy's going to use that, and he wants us to abandon the things that God has given us, the ideas, the relationships, the prayer life, the calling, the purpose. Every time there's a nor'easter in town, we run because panic convinces us that if we deal with it, we're not going to survive the storm. The men on the ship, they were plotting to flee, but Paul stands up in the middle of the chaos and said, unless these men stay with the ship, we're not going to be saved. He said, everybody on this boat going to have to stay on this boat until it goes down. That's a good word for a family. We're staying on this boat together. We're staying on this boat together. If it's going down, we going down, and then we swim in the shore together. Real courage knows how to stay. It knows how to stick until God says stop sticking. Everybody talks about starting, but few people want to remain. Real courage remains. It remains. And some of us we're sending our graduates out, especially those going to college. We need to teach them how to remain, how to stay stuck in what God has for them. How to not run when their faith is unpopular or questioned. How not to jump ship every time it feels inconvenient to be that holy one. When holiness becomes lonely, when following Jesus costs you something socially or emotionally or professionally, we need to train one another how to stick. Hebrews 10:23 says, "Let us hold tightly, without wavering, to the hope we affirm, for God can be trusted to keep his promise." Family, real courage stays in the boat even when the water gets rough, even when the future feels uncertain, even when fear starts whispering, run. Real courage knows how to stay anchored until God brings you to the safe place. Real courage stays. It knows how to stay. Real courage knows how to submit. Real courage knows how to stay. And dimension number 3, real courage trusts God enough to lose. Do you trust God enough to lose? We have oriented to our demise sometimes, I think, the Christian faith around this idea of winning. And then we let the culture define what we mean by winning. The truth is, Jesus defines what winning is, and sometimes it looks like losing. Are you courageous enough to lose if it's God's will? Because sometimes losing is actually winning. Sometimes it don't look that way to everybody else, but what's going on inside of you tells a different story. Sometimes losing is actually winning. When I lose my attitude, I win. When I lose my fear, I win. When I lose my anger issues, I win. And sometimes God has to allow us to lose some things, to remove from us the fear of losing. And we understand now that what we thought losing was is really not that bad, because he's shaped winning out of it. Look at the text, fam. Acts 27 says the storm got so severe that the crew started throwing everything overboard, trying to survive. First the cargo, then the equipment, the gear, then eventually the ship itself started losing it. And in the middle of all of this, in the middle of all of that losing, Paul stands up and says, none of you will lose your lives, even though the ship is going to go down. Now that sounds like losing to me. They lost their provision, they lost the cargo, they lost the literal ship that was under their feet. And Paul says, I know the provisions are gone, but I still have a promise. Are you courageous enough to trust God with the promise while the provisions are literally getting thrown overboard? What you thought was going to get you to the other side, it's being lost left and right. You still going to trust God with the promise then? The ship was never the promise. God never promised. The angel told Paul, you're going to get to Caesar. I'm going to save your life. But he didn't once say I was going to save the ship. He didn't say I'm going to save the ship. And sometimes we conflate the ship with the promise. We conflate the how that we see with the promise. We conflate the bank account that we see with the promise. We conflate the relationship that we see with the promise. We conflate what we see and what we believe to be true with the promise of God, and then we decide if we're going to believe God's promise based on what we see. And he said, I didn't say nothing about the ship. I don't need the ship to get you to the shore. I can get you to the shore on broken stuff. I can get you to the shore on pieces of the ship. I can get you to the shore on branches and trash and garbage. I can get you to the shore by putting my hand underneath you and letting you float. I can get you to the shore all by myself. The ship was never the promise. I don't need a ship when I got Jesus. Jesus is the ship. Jesus is the bridge over troubled water. Jesus is my hiding place. Jesus is my cover. Jesus. Are you courageous enough to trust God when your life looks like you're losing? Are you courageous enough to let him redefine the way you see loss and give you a new definition of winning? The ship was never the promise. The ship was just the transportation. Rome was the promise. Caesar was the promise. Assignment was the promise. The ship was a method. It was just a way to get there. But it wasn't the promise itself. You know, I used to have a dream car. Back when I was younger, I said I wanted a Lexus IS 250. That was my dream car. Yeah, I don't know. Y'all don't like it. I like it. That's what I liked it real good. And I saved all my money, and I was doing all the things, and one day God blessed me to get a Lexus IS 250. I loved it. I drove it around for a year or so, and then I realized this is just a car. This is just a box that rolls with a bill. What I'm trying to tell you is that when you fall out of love with the transportation and just fall in love with the transporter, when you learn how to not be so enamored with the how and just fall in love with the who. When you get to a place where you can honestly and truly say, I literally don't care how you do it. You can use A or B, C divided by 3. I don't care. However you do it is fine, but I'm in love with the doer. The how doesn't matter. It's the who and the what. So Paul, he eventually, the soldiers, they said, some of y'all, we're going to get to land. Some of y'all swim. You can swim. If you can hold on to a piece of the ship, hold on to a piece of the ship. But because everybody stayed, Paul says, we're all going to make it. God has promised we're all going to make it. The how, it does not matter. The who and the what is what matters. That's why Paul could stand in the middle of a sinking ship, a sinking situation, a sinking moment, and declare, I believe God. Because he walked with God when he got to ride in the Lexus. And he walked with God when he got to ride on the donkey. He walked with God when he got knocked off the horse and had to walk his way blind into town. He walked with God in the middle of the night. He walked with God in the middle of the day. He walked with God in the prison cell. He walked with God with sickness in his body. When his eyes were hurting, he walked with God. When he was taken up to the third heaven, he walked with God. The how doesn't matter. It's the who and the what. So Paul said, I believe God because he's proven himself. He's shown himself to me in every situation. I done been on some boats before. I done had to walk in the middle of the night until my feet bled. I had to hide. I've had to do this. I've had to do that. But Paul said every time I needed to get to the promiser knew how to get me there. Every time I needed to get to the assignment knew how to get me there. I believe God. I believe him in the middle of this ship. I believe him when I'm floating in the water. I believe him when I get to the island. I believe him in Malta. I believe him on the boat. I believe him in Caesar's palace. I believe him in the prison because I am a survivor. And I take courage. Family, whatever you're going through, whatever the battle is, whatever you're graduating from into, you got to take courage. Not a revelation of who you are, your confidence, your identity, your ego, but confidence that's rooted in a revelation of who he is and what he says and where he's taking us. Take courage. Stand on your feet with us.